Maroon Lake rests in silence, its glassy surface holding the reflection of Twin Peaks like a secret it refuses to share. The air there feels older, sharper, each breath touched by something that doesn't belong to the present. Visitors say it's peaceful, almost sacred, but the stillness lingers too long, as if the water itself is listening. When the wind dies, even the trees hesitate to move, and the world feels paused between heartbeats. Beneath that perfect calm lies an unease that no photograph can capture. Locals avoid speaking of it, though everyone seems to know the same story, that the lake isn't as shallow as maps claim, and sometimes it swallows sound altogether. They say divers once descended, expecting to find stone and silt, but discovered something impossible instead. Something shaped by hands, something that looked exactly like a doorway, waiting beneath the surface. Ethan Moore was the kind of diver people trusted with their lives. A former rescue specialist from Arizona, he had logged over 200 dives in lakes deeper and darker than Maroon. The trip was meant to be simple, an early summer weekend with clear skies, calm water, and no expectations beyond quiet exploration. He arrived at dawn, the air thin and crisp, sunlight crawling down the mountains like liquid gold. Local rangers remembered him as polite, efficient, almost meticulous. He checked his oxygen levels twice, his backup light 3 times, and smiled when someone joked about ghost stories. "Every lake has them," he said, "but water doesn't keep secrets forever." By noon, Ethan had anchored his small inflatable raft near the center of the lake. His GoPro light blinked red as he recorded a short log, describing visibility, temperature, and his plan to trace the lakebed's northern ridge. His tone was calm, steady, and professional. Then, just before slipping beneath the surface, he looked toward the shore and muttered almost playfully, "If I find Atlantis down there, don't wait up." The first 15 minutes of the dive went exactly as expected. His descent was smooth. The camera captured swirls of suspended silt drifting like snow. Sunlight fractured into thin beams, filtering through the clear water. He moved methodically, brushing past smooth stones, occasionally glancing at his depth gauge. The radio logs between Ethan and his surface partner were casual at first, standard updates, oxygen readings, pressure adjustments. But at a depth of 27 meters, something changed. The feed began picking up a low, rhythmic thrum. Faint at first, then growing like a heartbeat muffled by miles of water. Ethan paused. His voice on the radio sounded uncertain. "You hear that?" he asked. The response came back clean. "Negative. Signal's fine." Then came a static crackle, and his next words were distorted, drawn out as if underwater twice over. "It's echoing back." From the surface, his partner reported momentary interference, compass twitching, sonar flickering. Ethan's last clear message was at 2:13 p.m. "Visual anomaly ahead. Smooth wall formation looks artificial." Silence followed. 10 seconds, then 30, then nothing. The rescue began within the hour. Rangers arrived before sunset. Visibility was perfect, yet every diver who entered the water returned uneasy. They reported sudden temperature drops, disorientation, and pressure changes inconsistent with depth. One described feeling like something massive had just moved away beneath him. By nightfall, the operation was called off. Ethan's raft drifted gently near shore, his gear untouched, his camera missing. Days passed, then weeks. The search expanded. Drones, sonar scans, even geological teams. The official report listed him as missing, presumed drowned, though his body never surfaced. Locals whispered otherwise. They said the lake doesn't give back what it takes unless it wants to. 3 weeks later, a fisherman casting near the far bank snagged something heavy. When he reeled it in, it wasn't a fish, but a camera housing, its metal frame coated with silt and algae. The authorities cleaned it carefully, drying the microcard inside. Most of the footage was static, distorted, warped, filled with strange flickering bands of light. But in the final 30 seconds, the image cleared. Ethan's flashlight illuminated a perfectly curved structure buried beneath layers of sediment. A smooth archway of pale stone, seamless and circular, carved into the bedrock itself. He moved closer, reaching out a gloved hand. The water shimmered faintly, light bending around the edges. Then, just before the image froze, a pulse of brightness flooded the lens, white, soundless, absolute. The screen went black. That was the last anyone ever saw of Ethan Moore. And some say, if you listen closely by the water at night, the lake still hums, soft, steady, waiting for someone else to answer. When investigators reviewed Ethan Moore's recovered footage, they expected grainy noise and meaningless distortion. Instead, they saw something that shouldn't have been there at all. Frame by frame, they enhanced the light balance, revealing an unmistakable curve, a perfect half-circle of pale stone embedded in the lake bed. It was too precise, too symmetrical, too smooth to be natural. The formation appeared to rise from the silt like the edge of a buried monument, its surface glimmering faintly even in the dim light. Experts were called in. A geologist from Denver analyzed the frames and dismissed them as optical illusion caused by particulate refraction. Yet when the footage was digitally modeled, the structure's geometry held true. The arch measured nearly 4 meters across, with an unbroken curvature no natural fault line could reproduce. No known sedimentary or igneous process forms that kind of symmetry at that depth, the report stated. Quietly, the file was sealed. Locals, however, didn't need a report to confirm what they already believed. To them, it wasn't stone, it was the lake itself, opening an eye. "It's been sleeping for centuries," said one elderly resident, "and he just made it look back." Word spread across Aspen and Glenwood like wind through pine needles. People visited the lake, standing at its edge in silence, as if waiting to see it blink. Online, theories erupted. Some claimed it was the entrance to an ancient fault system, underground caverns shaped by pressure over millennia. Others said it was older than the mountains themselves, the remnant of a lost civilization that had drowned before history began. A more modern camp suggested military involvement, arguing that the smooth curvature resembled reinforced concrete, not stone. They speculated about Cold War experiments, secret bunkers, or test chambers sealed and forgotten under the Rockies. Still, none of the theories accounted for the anomaly captured at the end of the footage, the brief pulse of light that bent the water like heat. Physicists noted the distortion was inconsistent with reflection and might indicate electromagnetic interference. Paranormal researchers, in contrast, called it a reactive threshold, a doorway responding to observation. The more people, studied the footage, the stranger it seemed, as if the data itself resisted understanding. One journalist, Maria Halden, became obsessed. She had covered environmental stories in the region for years, but couldn't ignore the peculiar silence surrounding the case. Requests for additional footage were denied. Her emails to park officials went unanswered. Then one evening, she received a phone call from a number with no ID. The voice on the other end was rough, aged and trembling. "You don't know what you're asking about," the man said. "Some things down there weren't meant to be found." Maria pressed for details, but he hesitated. After a long pause, he added softly, "I was there once, long before your diver. They told me never to speak of it, because the lake remembers." The line went dead before she could ask his name, but 2 days later, an envelope arrived at her newsroom, no return address, only a faded park ranger badge inside, and a single handwritten note. It wasn't the first time the lake opened. It won't be the last. And with that, Maria decided to find him, the man who claimed to have seen the arch before anyone else. The man who knew what was buried beneath Maroon Lake. The retired ranger's name was Thomas Avery, though few remembered him anymore. When Maria Halden arrived at his cabin, deep in Siúrfúrð, the aspen-lined backroads outside Crested Butte, he seemed reluctant to open the door. His eyes, pale and tired, studied her for a long time before he spoke. "You're digging into something that doesn't like to be uncovered," he murmured. "And that Lake Maroon, it never forgets who stirs it." Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and dust. Maps of the region covered the walls, dotted with faint pencil markings, circles, and notes in an unsteady hand. He poured black coffee into 2 chipped mugs, sat down heavily, and exhaled as though releasing years of silence. When she asked about 1973, he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared out the window, where a line of mountains cut through the dying light. That night, he began slowly. Wasn't on any schedule. No ranger shift, no alerts. I was off duty. Got a call around 11 p.m. Said there'd been a containment breach at the lake. I thought it was a joke, but when I got there, his voice faltered. There were floodlights, at least half a dozen trucks, helicopters circling low enough to rattle the water. Maria leaned forward, recording quietly. Thomas continued, each word carefully measured. Men in dark uniforms, no patches, no names. They had these silver crates, heavy ones lowered into the lake by crane. They weren't retrieving something. They were covering something. When one of the cables snapped, I saw it, metal. Not rusted, not wreckage, smooth like the inside of a mirror. He paused, his hands trembling slightly. They pulled it up just before dawn. A cylinder, maybe 12 feet long, sealed on both ends. I never saw what was inside, but when they lifted it clear of the water, the whole lake began to hum. Not like an engine or wind, it was low, alive, vibrating in your chest. The air shimmered. The floodlights flickered. "What happened next?" Maria asked softly. They loaded the cylinder onto a flatbed, drove off toward Aspen. By morning, every trace of the operation was gone. No logs, no flight records, nothing in dispatch. My supervisor told me I must have dreamed it. The thing is, I wasn't the only one there. He leaned back, his eyes wet but unblinking. 2 other rangers quit within a week. One left the state entirely. I stayed because I thought I could make sense of it. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I still hear it sometimes when the air's cold enough, or when the wind moves wrong through the valley. That same humming, like something stirring beneath the water, waiting for permission. Maria asked if he believed it was the same anomaly Ethan Moore had seen decades later. Thomas nodded slowly. The same place, the same sound. But Ethan didn't just find the doorway. He found what was behind it. He reached into a drawer and slid a yellowed photograph across the table. It showed the lake at night, floodlights reflecting off the surface, but at the center of the water, a faint circular distortion, like ripples frozen in time. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled in pencil. "We closed it once. It opened itself again." Maria's recorder caught his final words, low and trembling. "Everyone thinks we found a doorway down there," he said. "But it's not a doorway we found. It's what opened it." Outside, the wind rose softly through the pines, carrying that same distant hum from somewhere deep within the valley, steady, rhythmic, and far too familiar. Maria returned to Maroon Lake not as a journalist chasing folklore, but as an investigator trying to prove the impossible could be measured. She brought with her Dr. Samuel Gray, a soft-spoken physicist from Boulder whose expertise lay in electromagnetic interference. He didn't believe in hauntings or doorways, only in signals and frequencies. Yet even he admitted the ranger's story was too specific to ignore. They arrived at dawn, the same hour Ethan Moore had vanished. The air was thin, still, and charged with the metallic scent that precedes a storm. Dr. Gray set up his instruments. Magnetometers, EMF sensors, geophones, all arranged in a half circle along the northern ridge of the lake. The goal was simple: detect any magnetic irregularities that might explain the reports. But within minutes, nothing behaved as it should. Compasses began to spin erratically, needles jerking as if alive. Audio recorders caught low pulses, inaudible to the human ear, but consistent in rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. "Mechanical interference?" Maria asked. Dr. Gray frowned. "Not unless the mountain itself has a generator." The sound wasn't coming from the air. It was radiating up from beneath the water. He adjusted the sensors, muttering about calibration errors. But the anomalies grew stronger the closer they positioned the instruments to the shoreline. The readings spiked at intervals too regular to be random. "It's oscillating," Gray whispered almost reverently. "Like a living thing." Maria watched the surface of the lake ripple, even though no wind stirred. The water seemed to respond to the pulse, expanding and contracting ever so slightly, as though breathing. For hours they recorded the data, and the longer they observed, the stranger it became. Electronic equipment drained faster than expected. Camera batteries flickered despite being freshly charged, and every 15 minutes a faint distortion rolled through the air, a wave of static that made their skin prickle. "It's like standing inside a field of resonance," Gray said. "Something harmonic, but organic." By nightfall, the signals faded. The lake returned to silence. They reviewed the data inside the ranger's old cabin, the instruments still warm from overuse. When plotted on a graph, the frequencies formed a perfect repeating pattern. Not random noise, not geological vibration. It was too structured, too deliberate. Maria stared at the sequence, tracing the waveforms with her finger. "It looks like a code," she murmured. Dr. Gray nodded, expression unreadable. "Or a language." He overlaid the signal on known seismic and electromagnetic profiles, but nothing matched. Then, almost by accident, Maria compared it to a transcription from an anthropological journal she'd read weeks earlier, a rhythmic pattern once used in Ute ceremonial chants around the Maroon Valley. The alignment was exact. The same 3-beat pulse, the same pause, repeated endlessly. Dr. Gray leaned back, pale and silent. "If that's true," he said slowly, "then the lake isn't reacting to us. It's remembering them, Outside, the air had gone utterly still. The water below no longer shimmered. It quivered faintly, almost expectant, as if the old song had finally been heard again. Long before the park maps and hiking trails, before asphalt roads cut through the valley, the Ute people called Maroon Lake something else entirely: Tahvat Tua, the lake that listens. Their stories spoke of a place that remembered sound, a body of water so still it could hold an echo forever. The elders warned that to speak too loudly near it was to feed it, because the lake did not just hear, it answered. According to the old legends, travelers passing through the valley would sometimes hear whispers beneath the frozen surface in winter. Not voices exactly, but low hums, tones that seemed to imitate their own words. If you stayed long enough, the hum began to sync with your heartbeat, until it no longer sounded like something outside of you, but something deep within. Those who listened too long often didn't return. The ice, they said, would crack in perfect silence, leaving only a ripple that faded before anyone could scream. Storytellers told of a hunter who camped near the lake one snowless winter. He awoke to find the ground vibrating gently, the trees trembling as if breathing. The sound was faint but constant. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses again. He followed it to the shore and leaned over the still water. What he saw there wasn't his reflection, but another face, identical, blinking out of sync with his own. By morning, the hunter's footprints led straight into the lake, and there were no others around to follow. The Ute believed the sound was a memory, the echo of something that once lived beneath. Some said it was an ancient spirit, a watcher who slept through centuries until disturbed by man's voice. Others whispered of an opening deep below, a threshold between this world and the hollow silence that waited beyond it. If you listen long enough, one elder told a missionary in 1882, the water will start listening back. Maria Holden sat by the same shoreline, the night wind cool against her skin, remembering those words as she played the recordings from Ethan Moore's final dive. The data file pulsed in rhythmic precision. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. The same ancient pattern. She adjusted the playback speed, slowing it down, layering the frequencies one over another, and something extraordinary emerged. The harmonics aligned perfectly with a pattern from a 19th century ethnographic record describing the echo below. It wasn't random noise. It was music if music could be alive. The tones vibrated with a strange warmth, subtle and steady, as if the water itself was breathing through the machines. Dr. Gray's analysis confirmed it. "This isn't an anomaly," he said softly. "It resonates. The same signal Ethan detected. The same rhythm the Ute recorded generations ago." Maria stared at the lake, where moonlight stretched across the surface like glass. The ripples glided outward, gentle and deliberate, as though stirred from beneath by something waiting to be acknowledged. It began innocently, the way most strange things do with photographs. Tourists visiting Maroon Lake posted them online, proud of their perfect reflections. Twin peaks mirrored in flawless symmetry, skies so clear they looked painted, but slowly, observant eyes began to notice something was wrong. In several images, the reflections didn't match. A man standing by the water's edge appeared twice, once in reality, and once again in the reflection. Only in the mirror he was turned toward the lake, staring back. In another, the mountain's outline warped, bending slightly inward like glass under pressure. One photo showed a faint door-shaped shadow in the mirrored water, yet the landscape itself was clear and unbroken. At first, people laughed it off. Glitches, camera artifacts, editing tricks. But when Maria compared dozens of untouched photos taken years apart, the distortions were identical, positioned in the same corner of the lake each time. Even professional photographers, skeptical and methodical, failed to explain it. "It's not lens distortion," one wrote. "It's geometry behaving like memory." Soon, visitors began describing unsettling sensations while photographing the water, moments where their reflections lagged behind by a fraction of a second, or where a second outline flickered just behind their own. One woman swore she saw her reflection smile before she did. Another claimed her camera froze mid-shot, then displayed an image she hadn't taken. A pale doorway shape rippling beneath her mirrored silhouette. Local folklore adapted quickly. They began calling it the second image, a phenomenon where the lake didn't reflect what was above it, but what was beneath. Some claimed it showed the other side, a visual echo of the world below the waterline. Others thought it was a warning that the lake was beginning to mirror something that shouldn't be seen. Maria analyzed the anomalies using spectral imaging software. When she isolated the wavelengths from the photographs, faint distortions pulsed at the same 3-beat pattern recorded by Dr. Gray's instruments. The reflections weren't just visual, they were responsive, aligning perfectly with the lake's rhythmic resonance. "It's like it's syncing with itself," she whispered, as if the water's reflection is trying to remember what it used to show. The story might have remained another piece of folklore, if not for one man, Darren Holt, a local hiker who captured a particularly haunting image. In his photo, his reflection wasn't alone. Standing beside him in the water's mirror was another figure, featureless, facing him directly. Behind them both, a faint outline of a doorway seemed to shimmer through the surface. Darren told friends the image felt personal, like the lake had taken his picture too. For days, he couldn't sleep. He claimed he heard faint knocking from his bathroom sink, the sound of dripping water that stopped when he entered the room. Finally, one night, he packed his camera and drove back to Maroon Lake, determined to prove the reflection wasn't an illusion. He told his sister he just needed to see it one more time. He never came back. The recovered footage begins with nothing but the sound of gravel under boots and the faint hum of crickets hidden in the dark. Darren Holt's breathing is steady, the kind of calm that belongs to someone convincing themselves they're not afraid. His camera wobbles as he walks down the familiar trail, the beam of his flashlight slicing through low fog that clings to the trees like smoke. The lake is ahead, just a shimmer through the mist. He mutters to himself, voice soft, almost apologetic. "I just need to see it again, just to make sure." The timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. The air hums faintly, not mechanical but organic, as if the mountain itself were exhaling. The camera catches the shoreline. Silent, still, perfect. His reflection stretches out before him, tall and thin against the glowing surface. The mist glides low across the water, and for a moment, his flashlight beam seems to pass through its own reflection instead of bouncing off it. Then the hum deepens. It's subtle at first, a vibration in the air, the kind that settles behind the ribs. Darren whispers, "You hear that?" Though no one answers. The sound recorder picks up a pattern. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses again. The same rhythm Dr. Gray documented. The same tone that lived in Ethan Moore's final dive. The camera trembles as Darren steps closer to the water. His reflection lags behind him by half a second. He crouches, touches the surface. "It's warm," he says, surprised. A ripple spreads outward, perfect circles vanishing into fog. For a heartbeat, the hum stops entirely. Then movement. The water brightens beneath him, faint and silver, light bending from below. His camera adjusts, struggling to focus. What comes into view is not rock or silt, but a shape, smooth, flawless, symmetrical. An archway of light forms beneath the water, trembling softly like a door made of liquid glass. The reflection above it distorts violently, bending like a mirror, melting under heat. Darren steps back. Oh God, it's real. The hum becomes louder, almost melodic now, vibrating the microphone until his words blur into static. He inches closer again, drawn forward despite his fear. The flashlight beam quivers, reflected dozens of times within the watery frame of the arch. Then the impossible happens, the reflection straightens. It no longer mirrors him, it faces him. For a second, two silhouettes stand where one should be. His and something just beyond it. The distortion thickens, forming concentric ripples that don't spread outward. They pull inward toward the light. Darren gasps, the camera jerking violently. His feet splash once, twice. It's pulling, the words cut out in a burst of static. The last image freezes mid-motion. The lake glowing from within, fog twisting upward, and a faint outline of a human figure reaching forward through light that bends like breathing glass. Then silence. No splash. No scream. Only the faint hum returned, steady and patient, echoing in threes. Weeks later, Maria Holden receives an unmarked package at her newsroom. Inside, Darren's camera, cleaned, battery replaced. No note, no sender, just a single file labeled with a date and time. The night Maroon Lake opened its eyes once more. Maria watched the footage alone in her office, the glow of the monitor washing her face in pale blue light. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of the computer, a sound that for the first time made her uneasy. She pressed play, and Darren Holt's final recording filled the screen. No screaming, no chaos, just the steady sound of water breathing. The camera's angle was fixed toward the lake bed, focused on the doorway. Even through the grain, the image was hypnotic. It pulsed faintly, as though drawing in the surrounding light and exhaling it again. The edges weren't stone or metal, but something in between, like liquid frozen mid-motion. The glow wasn't bright, but alive. It moved with rhythm, slow and patient, as if the lake itself had a heartbeat. Maria replayed it again and again, trying to notice something new. But the strangest thing wasn't what moved, it was what didn't. The silt, the particles, even the light refracting through the water, all seemed to pause whenever the pulse reached its peak. Reality itself bent gently around the doorway, refusing to behave. Her scientific mind tried to explain it. Electromagnetic interference, optical distortion, air bubbles refracting the beam. Yet none of the data matched. The wavelengths pulsed too regularly. The silence between hums lasted precisely 3 seconds. No variance, no errors. As if the lake wasn't reacting randomly, but deliberately. When she slowed the footage, something subtle emerged. A faint shimmering along the arch's outline. It looked like movement, not outward, but inward, as though the surface of the doorway folded into itself endlessly. There was no sense of depth, no bottom to the light, just an infinite reflection that pulled the gaze and refused to let go. Maria caught herself leaning closer to the screen, her breath sinking unconsciously with the rhythm. For a brief moment, it felt as if the footage was breathing with her. She tore her eyes away, heart pounding. Every time she looked again, the doorway appeared slightly different. Closer, sharper, like it was responding to attention. She wrote in her notes, "It behaves like it knows it's being watched." There were no creatures, No shapes, no shadows moving within the light. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was observing her back, not through eyes, but through understanding. The terror didn't come from what might emerge, but from the realization that maybe nothing needed to. The doorway wasn't an entrance or an exit. It was awareness, patience, endless and alive. Maria closed the laptop. The silence of the room pressed inward like deep water. Her final entry in the report was brief, written by hand. The resonance has ceased. No further anomalies detected. The lake's hum stopped 3 days ago. She set down her pen, uncertain whether to feel relief or dread. Because silence, she thought, doesn't always mean it's gone. Sometimes it just means it's listening. Morning comes slowly to Maroon Lake. The air is colder now, sharper than it should be for spring. The water lies still, too still. No ripples, no wind brushing its surface. To the casual eye, it's peaceful. To those who know the stories, it feels like holding one's breath. The lake has grown quieter since the last disappearance. The birds avoid its edge, and the trees, once mirrored perfectly on the surface, now appear distorted, as if the reflection below no longer agrees with what stands above. Locals say the lake has stopped listening. Fishermen notice their voices don't echo anymore. Hikers describe a strange pressure in their ears. Like sound itself refuses to cross the water. It's as though the connection between world and reflection has been severed, replaced by something blank and waiting. The hum is gone. No more rhythms, no more pulses, no trace of the soft vibration that once trembled beneath the earth. Yet somehow, that silence feels heavier than any sound. Maria Halden's final report never reached publication. The files she submitted to her editor vanished from the archive, replaced by a blank folder titled Maroon Closed Case. Her notes were never found. Only her audio recorder remained, discovered weeks later near the ranger's old cabin. The tape contained a single minute of sound. Footsteps through frost, a pause, and then a whisper. Not a voice exactly, but the faint suggestion of one, layered over water moving in the distance. In town, people still talk about her. Some claim she left, that she couldn't bear what she saw. Others insist she's still there, watching the lake from the tree line. But no one stays long after sunset anymore. The reflections behave strangely after dark. Locals describe them shifting sheer, slow, deliberate movements that don't match the world above. A branch sways in the mirror when the real tree stands still. A faint shape appears beside you where no one stands. The surface no longer mirrors. It remembers. Once, a child threw a stone into the lake. The water rippled outward, but the reflection didn't follow. It held still, unbroken, like a sheet of glass refusing to move. That was the last time anyone dared touch the surface. Scientists, tourists, even believers have moved on. But sometimes, in the quiet between mountain winds, a single ripple appears near the center of the lake, expanding outward, slow and even. Locals say it happens when someone nearby thinks too deeply about it, as if the memory of the thought alone is enough to stir the water. Perhaps the doorway didn't close after all. Perhaps it simply moved deeper, where no reflection can reach and no sound can wake it again. Or maybe it learned what it wanted, and now, at last, it's content to listen from beneath. But if you ever find yourself standing at Maroon Lake, and the air goes still enough to hear your own heartbeat, don't look too closely at your reflection, because if you ever see it blink, don't lean closer, because sometimes the doorway looks back.